Well, hello everyone. Welcome to my short case study on green urban planning. So, in the context of our current climate crisis, the way our cities, towns, and villages must be readapted to meet our environmental obligation means green urban planning has the potential to totally transform our day-to-day lives. This means it's perhaps the most tangible way ordinary citizens will be able to see how we are altering our physical world to combat climate change. So what is green urban planning? Well, the academic answer would be that it's an environmentally conscious way of planning and designing our lived environments. In other words, designing our streets, parks, workplaces, etc., in such a way that at worst they minimize the negative environmental impact through reduced carbon emissions, or at best contributes positively to the environment through carbon sequestration or promoting environmentally friendly behaviour. However, in truth, the urban planner has to think beyond just the environmental elements of his or her designs. They must take into account that our towns and cities are also healthy places to live, that economically dynamic, as well as facilitating social cohesion. So thankfully, I think more and more people are coming to realise that our societies and our economies are embedded within and not external to nature, that healthier economies are based on healthy environments. Now, the scars of our past failures in urban planning are plain to see. As the pictures show here, when the natural world is not sufficiently factored into urban planning, we get congested, dirty, decaying, and unpleasant urban environments, not built for human beings, but for the motor car. So you can see the M8, which tore through central Glasgow, perhaps the most infamous example of how the motor car upended our urban environments in the 20th century. The quote shown is from Stephen Bennett, who's damning. He states that transport planners have failed, pure and simple, and that there's an urgent need to change and combat carbon emissions in the surface transport sector. Now, one of the easiest ways to significantly improve our urban environment is to make way for more trees, as well as maintain our existing tree stock. Why? Well, according to the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, one tree can absorb as much as 150 kilograms of carbon dioxide annually. They also filter for urban pollutants and fine particulates, thus providing an added health benefit, making the air on our streets cleaner. It's also the case that trees help cool the city and thus mean there's less need for air conditioning in the warming summer months. Leeds University, who have done a great deal of research into how trees benefit the urban environment, insist we need to make a greater effort to preserve our mature trees. Of course, the larger the tree and the longer it lives, the more carbon is stored. Hence, we need greater emphasis on maintaining our existing tree stock. It's also worth mentioning Scotland in particular would be wise to plant more evergreen trees so sequestration can take place throughout the year and not just in spring and summer. Moving on, a more holistic plan for transforming our urban areas to meet our environmental obligations, as well as our social and economic aims, is the 20-minute neighbourhood. In short, the ambition for a 20-minute neighbourhood is that all essential services, that being food, learning, healthcare, outdoor activities, and active communities, as well as ideally work, should be within a short walk or bike ride from your residence. It's hoped this will not only support our net zero ambitions by virtue of people not needing to expend as much carbon getting from place to place, but also to enable our citizens to live better, healthier, and more sustainable lives. Now, Paris has really ran with this particular idea. Indeed, right now, owed primarily to the incredibly high density of Paris, which is matched only by a handful of other cities around the globe, most essential services for Parisians are already within just 10 minutes of reach, albeit in some neighbourhoods there's greater distance involved, so it's kind of unequal in that respect. But as you can see from this before and after graphic, Paris intends to comprehensively free its streets from the car, whilst maintaining new space for cycling and walking. Of course, this is facilitated by a world-class metro system, which not everyone has. These plans for a Rue de Vie, or city streets will see parking spaces turned into garden terraces in order to create a vibrant ground floor for independent businesses to make use of and thrive in. Paris also has plans to turn the streets around schools into school streets, banning cars, creating new public gardens and spaces to further green the local environment. Overall, you can see how this holistic approach to urban planning will contribute towards improving the public health and well-being physically and mentally, the local economy, as well as benefiting our climate. Now, there is one place which really lives and breathes environmental sustainability and the 20-minute neighbourhood ideal, and that is Vauban in Freiburg, Germany. Now, Vauban is a pretty unique place. It was a French military base until the 1990s, after which it became vacant land occupied by squatters, who eventually formed an eco-community, which became a fully fledged city district in the last 3 decades. Vauban has been described as the most sustainable town in Europe. Indeed, it was the first community in the world in which all the buildings produce a positive energy balance, meaning they generate more renewable energy than the building and its occupants consume. Hence, they are known as plus energy buildings or passive houses. These passive houses are at the cutting edge of energy efficiency. So they're well insulated, they have timber frames, they're airtight sealants to keep the cold air out and the warm air in. And as you can see, near universal rooftop solar panels and geothermal heat pumps. The town is supplied by a district heating system fueled by municipal biomass and a gas cogeneration plant, so a CHP. So looking at this map, you can see evidence of 2 kinds of urban planning techniques: filtered permeability and a fused grid. Both of these are used to either limit access to motor cars or make it awkward to use a personal car in a neighbourhood while prioritising cycling and walking. Indeed, roads are purposefully narrow and not user-friendly to motorists. There are plenty of cycle paths and pedestrian routes across the neighbourhood, as well as a tram line which runs through the town. Looking at transit in more depth, residents of Vauban may indeed own cars and park them in town. However, they have to pay the equivalent of $23,000 a year for a parking spot. That's the majority of residents don't own a car at all. It's also the case that every home is within short walking distance of a tram stop, as well as the schools, businesses, and shopping centres. The result is 57% of households who once had a car have since then given them up. In total, 70% of residents have no car whatsoever, which is quite remarkable for the Western world. We have a lot to learn from Malmö too in Sweden, in particular their green points system. So Malmö's BO01 neighbourhood was built on the site of deserted docklands and contaminated soil. Today, the neighbourhood is powered by wind and heated by an underground geothermal hotspot. Under the green point system, each of BO01's apartments have to meet a predetermined green space factor, according to city policy, that demands every development set aside a share of its footprint as green space. There are also biodiversity-focused bonus points awarded for anything from planting tall fruit trees and potted plants on the roadside to installing tiny birds' houses and ponds. The result is it creates more open, unrestricted green environments. So GSF programs have since then been adopted in Berlin and Hamburg, Seattle, Southampton, and Stockholm. Now, looking at developments closer to home, Edinburgh has plans to totally revamp both the new and old town. As you can see from the images outlining here, a part of a £314 million 10-year investment, Edinburgh would be transformed in line with the principles of the 20-minute neighbourhood to ensure the motor car is pushed aside in favour of pedestrians and cyclists. It has popular support with 80% of locals who are involved in consultations backing the proposal. There's many major streets will be closed to traffic, such as Coburn Street, Victoria Street, and Waverley Bridge. There are also plans to line Lothian Road with trees, integrating the public transport ticketing system, as well as build a new cycling and walking bridge connecting the old and the new towns. It's also worth mentioning, as part of this project, it's hoped Edinburgh will see an extension to the tram network, as well as continual improvements to its already impressive bus network. This is important since the 20-minute neighbourhood accepts that there are other services that will not always be within 20 minutes and will not need to be accessed on a daily basis. So, for example, a hospital. So you need to provide daily access to public transport, which gets you to these destinations. Therefore, it can be said ensuring a well-connected, comprehensive public transit network is totally vital. Starting these investments early means you can begin a cycle in which a well-connected public transport system increases usage among citizens, which then increases patronage, which ups the investment. It means they become more reliable, more frequent, and even more people want to use it. Eventually, everybody starts using it, but those who don't own a car, so those on lower incomes, they benefit most of all from this collective engagement. This goes a long way, not only in cutting carbon emissions, but tackling systemic social inequalities too. It's also worth mentioning a slightly unrelated note that in Stoughton Park in Edinburgh, a company called Greenspace has installed boreholes under sports pitches to collect heat using ground source heat pump technology, which supplies heat to a cluster of buildings on the park's edge. You could also see ground source heat pumps installed under playgrounds and tarmac, which heat considerably in the summer months. There are plans by Greenspace to roll out similar projects here in Falkirk and in North Lanarkshire as well. Finally, Glasgow. For years now, there's been concerns that the population of Glasgow city centre remains roughly half that of other UK cities of equivalent size, so like Manchester or Liverpool, thus deterring any serious work towards establishing a 20-minute neighbourhood. The regeneration of Sighthill, however, offers the opportunity to begin changing that. The Sighthill Transformational Regeneration Area, or the TRA, comprises of around 50 hectares and will be a new neighbourhood within 15 minutes walk from George Square. The site will comprise of 1,000 new homes, new parkland and green spaces, and a new community campus school. And perhaps most importantly, a new road and pedestrian cyclist bridges connecting the city centre over the M8, as you can see in the image below. So overall, successful green urban planning presents us with the opportunity not only to decarbonise our economies and livelihoods by living in a more sustainable way, but also tackle systemic societal inequalities, which stunt individual well-being and economic dynamism. Thank you.